Recording in progress.
For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
All right, I'm going to call to order the joint meeting of the Metro Council and the Merck Commission. Welcome, everybody. Connor is going to call the roll, and then I'd like to just go back around with everyone and do an introduction, if that's okay. Everybody at the table. So that includes our COO and our attorney and staff that are here today. So go ahead, Connor. You can call the roll for attendance.
Thank you, President Peterson. Okay, I will be starting off with our Merck commissioners. Starting off with our counselors. Counselor Gonzalez.
Good morning, President.
Morning. Counselor Simpson.
Good morning, President.
Good morning. I heard you there, Counselor, but you were a little quiet. You may need to press the button on your mic. Counselor Wong.
Present.
Morning. Counselor Lewis.
Present.
Counselor Nolan.
Present.
I believe Counselor Rosenthal is excused today, I believe. And now moving on to our Merck commissioners. Chair Studemeyer Phillips.
Not here.
Not here. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I can't see everybody's faces today. All right, Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
Morning. Commissioner Hall.
Here.
Morning. Commissioner Chris Rusoff.
Here.
Commissioner Milan.
Here. Present.
Commissioner Palm.
Here.
And Commissioner Pendleton.
Present.
And finally, President Peterson.
Here. Thank you. All right, well, why don't we go around the room? Lynn Peterson, Metro Council President.
Christine Lewis, Deputy Council President, District 2 on Metro Council.
Carrie McLaren, Metro Attorney.
Marisa Madrigal, Chief Operating Officer for Metro.
Juan Carlos Gonzalez, Metro Councilor, District 4.
David Pendleton, Merck Commission. Duncan Huang, Metro Councilor, District 6.
Damian Hall, Merck Commission.
Mary Nolan, Metro Council, District 5, home to all the venues that the Merck oversees.
Deidre Chris Resloff, Merck Commissioner.
Ashton Simpson, District 1, Metro Council.
Gian Kim, Metro Staff, Development Project Manager for the Expo Project.
Paul Slyman, GM of Major Projects and Project Sponsor for this work.
Good morning, and online. Deanna, go ahead.
Good morning, Deanna Palm, Merck Commissioner.
Awesome. I can't see all of you. It changed. There we go. Commissioner Mullen.
Hello, Commissioner Milan, representing Multnomah County, Merck Commissioner.
Thanks. And Commissioner Martinez.
Good morning.
Merck Commissioner David Martinez, representing Multnomah County.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our first agenda item, which is the Expo Future COO Findings and Recommendation Report. As you all know, for the last several years, the Metro Council and the Merck Commission have supported a community-driven process to start visioning on how the Expo Center could be reimagined. At the direction of the Metro Council, the Portland Expo Center Development Opportunity Study was launched in 2019 to seek opportunities for the highest and best use of the site that brought about long-term financial sustainability. At our last joint meeting, we got an update from staff about the recently launched Request for Expressions of Interest, or RFEI process. We received 8 very different responses to that RFEI, and we have staff here today to present their findings and recommendations from the review of those proposals and to help us think about the next steps in this process. So as we go through all of this information, I think what we should probably do is wait until the end to have a full question and answer so that we can get through the bulk of the presentation, if that's okay with everyone. All right, well, I will turn it over to our COO, Marisa Madrigal, to kick us off.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's exciting to be here with you today. I am going to reserve my comments for a little bit later and hand it over to the project team that's done an incredible job wrangling a huge process. We are here today with some clarity because of the amazing project management work that they have done. So Paul Slyman, Jian Kim, take it away.
Thank you, Marisa. And we have a PowerPoint presentation. If you could go to, thank you very much, slide 3. So again, my name is Paul Slyman. I have been involved in this project really since its inception, but at request of Marisa, served as the project sponsor since 2021. And while Jean and I get to be the face today of all the work that's gone on, there's a tremendous number of people that we're representing who have been doing this work, many of which are behind me in the room, and you'll hear from a few community members later. So the arc of our presentation is really threefold. I'm going to share a little bit with you sort of how we got here, what's the history of this project. Gian will then talk about the expressions of interest that we received as part of our work. And then lastly, Marisa will share our CO's recommendation. We're really excited to have this conversation with you, and we know you're excited to have it back with us. So we will move along briskly in our comments so we can get to that point where you're having a conversation. I was counting, I know this is the 4th time you have in your joint meetings heard about this project. So, and thanks for being on that journey. Councilor Lewis just gave me a nod. Yes, I've had a child in that time. So we know you want to talk about this.
Talk about briskly.
When we have the invited testimony, I wanted to let the people that are providing it, they know who they are, if they'd come and join us at the table for expediency, and so everyone can see and hear you. So let's go to the next slide, please. Some of the folks that have been part of this really goes back to 2013, 2014, and we have had a steering committee and a project team. The project team members, you know, they're in our materials. I need to point out Matthew Rochford and his team at Expo that have been incredible partners throughout this. It's not easy when people like me are talking about different ways that perhaps things could get done for years. And Matthew has been the consummate professional, and we couldn't be here today without Matthew's leadership. We also have had a steering committee that has been remarkable, led by Councilor Lewis, Commissioners Hall and Chris Rusoff, our DCOO, Andrew Scott, who was maybe behind me, as well as Matthew. We have brought the hard questions to them. So anything that Gian and I can't resolve at the project team level, we bring to the steering committee, and they've really helped move this forward. The one person who has been in partnership the entire time is Amy Nelson. There were times when Amy and I were keeping this project going, I think the two of us, and now we have this incredible team. So thanks to all of them. Let me move on to the next slide, please. You may be familiar with the Hunden Strategic Partners Report of 2014. It was issued. That was a very important sort of grounding for Expo. Expo operates remarkably given their small staff, given the fact that they have 3 buildings that are 100 years old and 2 buildings that are new and modern, and they are able to maximize the activity that happens there, keep the lights on, keep the floors dry, and work very hard in serving the customers and the community. The Hunden study looked at 5 scenarios, because despite the incredible work of our staff out there, we don't have a long-term capital plan for the old buildings. And the Hunden study was looking at what could be a long-term capital plan. Of those 5 scenarios, 3 of them looked at some kind of refurbishment for the older halls, and 2 of them looked at more of a replacement strategy. The Hunden study, when all was done in 2014, recommended a rebuild of the old halls into a new multi-use facility. It was a significant price tag, and at the time, Metro wasn't sure how to move forward with a price tag that was as significant as it was. So we then went into a multi-year phase where staff looked at ways of generating more revenue for Expo. And the staff that worked on it looked at things like naming rights and sponsorship opportunities, and even an anchor tenant of sorts. It is 53 acres that is zoned industrial, and so any potential revenue generating opportunities that we look at would need to consider that zoning, or we'd have to pursue some kind of zoning change. That work was important, and it went on really in those years between the Hunden report of 2014 and when the new council came on board. And in 2019, the new council led by President Peterson directed a development opportunity study. So next slide, please. So the development opportunity study is a reasonably common effort that developers use when you're considering potential future uses for a building that's maybe not maximizing its use. I have never seen a development opportunity study done on a parcel as large as Expo. I've seen them done on much smaller parcels, and we benefited from experts like Commissioner Hall that work in this field professionally and sort of help guide that. The development opportunity study that we conducted was primarily done through a very valuable consultant, Cascadia Partners, and they conducted a series of expert interviews, community engagement, including the community that was most impacted by Expo and the Vanport floods. And they landed on 9 different future scenarios for Expo, and it looked at everything from soup to nuts, long-term industrial use to food, to sports, to makerspace, to recycling centers, and all that was very valuable. But when we brought the results of that to you in March of 2021, Council and Commission had 2 clear directions for us. So next slide, please. And I'm going to talk through what those two clear pieces of direction were. In any development opportunity study, you get to this juncture where you ask the owner of the property, are you going to sell it or are you going to hold on to it? And we came to that fork in the road. And Council and Commission said, deprioritize sale. For now, let's look at future scenarios that involve a partnership. Let's look at some kind of partnership, and you can see the hexagons on your screen there. Let's look at some kind of partnership that has Metro holding on to the site. And let's talk about different ways that we could replace some of the buildings, repurpose some of the buildings, or complement the present uses there. And while those hexagons look nice and clear and tight and in different colors on your screen, you know that nothing is as clear and clean as that. And anything we ultimately will land on will be some mixing of those hexagons. Another clear piece of direction that you gave us when we brought the study to you was, this study is great, but it's largely an academic exercise with some input from outside partners. Find out if there's real appetite, real interest out there in the world for partnerships at the Expo Center. And so you directed us at that time to seek some kind of RFP. We eventually landed on, through wise counsel of Office of Metro Attorney, request for expressions of interest. And while for quite a few months it was alphabet soup to those involved, RFEOI, RFEI, we landed on requests for expressions of interest for 2 primary reasons. One reason is that it provides MERC and Metro Council flexibility in directing staff and how we'll proceed. You're not locked into a formal procurement process, and you can help shape the future of Expo that you'd like to see. Another important reason for the RFEI, and this really played out in doing it, is it lowered the bar for participation. Because what you were interested in was local partnerships, if at all possible. And conducting an RFEI doesn't require any partners that are interested in necessarily proving up the entirety of their financing capabilities at the get-go. And so the RFEI really worked because it allowed, and you'll hear from Jean in just a moment, it allowed for local interested groups to share with us their vision for the future of Expo. And as we issued the RFEI, we were seeking 2 things. One, expressions of interest that bring about financial sustainability for the site, and represent the highest and best use as the community defines it for the facility. So next slide should be my last, and I'll pass it to Gian. So how do you define highest and best use for the site? That was hard, and it was really credit to the community members that shared their voices. MERC commissioners and some counselors were also involved in these conversations, and the remarkable work of Katie McDonald and our tribal outreach program to hear from urban, indigenous, and tribes what they'd like to see done at this site. What you see on your screen is what we call the guiding principles, and both of your bodies adopted them by resolution last year. These formed the basis of the request for expressions of interest, and any expressions of interest had to speak to these guiding principles. What you see in the yellow in the middle is the core central vision. That's what the community, the tribes want to see happen out at the site. And what you see in the blue around it is how you might bring about that core central vision. And while we've represented it here neatly in sort of one slide for you, just know that there are 3 or 4 pages that go behind this to really support how we will seek and find the highest and best use for the site. What I'd like to do is pass it to Gian next to talk through the request for expressions of interest process and share with you a little bit about what we heard some interests are. So Gian?
Thank you, Paul. Next slide, please. So here we are. I'm here to talk about the RFEI process, the submissions that came through, and also talk about the 10-week evaluation process that we went through. So over the last, June of last year, we launched the RFEI, and we spent the majority of the summer trying to solicit interest in this process. We had around 10 tours of the site. We had meetings with community-based organizations. We met with, thank you. We met with dozens of people who were interested in actually submitting an RFEI and were curious about it. So we had virtual sessions and we had in-person meetings with folks as well. So next slide, please. So what we received from this whole effort were 6 RFEIs and 2 proposals in response to the Honoring Cultural Legacy. I would like to point out that originally our thought was to mix and match proposals and submission teams at the get-go, but we heard very clearly from the community-based organizations that we don't have time or capacity to meet with a lot of different people. We think our proposals stand on their own, and credit to our steering committee. They said, well, we have a very flexible process. This is the whole intention of this process was to lower the barrier. And so we allowed these mini proposals to come in, and I'll talk about them in a second. So up top, you'll see the bubbles. You will see 2 orange ones. Those are what I call the traditional RFEI proposals. One is from ASM Global and their partners. They really were proposing Expo Center, but reimagined with additional activities like sports, live entertainment, and additional cultural events. Storyteller was a film and media campus with a subleasee of manufactured housing using cross-laminated timber. In the middle, we have our 2 developer proposals. They were very different. One was Trammell Crow and one was Spectacolis. Trammell Crow had a very clear vision for the site. They wanted to put up to 800,000 square feet of Class A industrial space, and then they would say, and then in turn, they wanted to refurbish halls A and B and potentially make a community center, what they were calling a new hall C, out of the repurposed materials from their development. Spectacolis, on the other hand, they had an invitation to Metro saying, you know, we would like to partner with you and co-create a vision for the future and equitable development. And so they had a bunch of different scenarios that they proposed, but really they wanted to go through a visioning process with us and determine next steps for the site. And then lastly, we have 2 partial use submissions. One was the Reuse Collective and one was Hemp Collective. The Reuse Collective wanted to be the first one-stop reuse shop in the nation where people could do materials donation and they would redistribute it through the community. And there would be educational offerings as well. That was for only halls B and C. And then Reggie was only for hall C. And they wanted to be, really grow the regional hemp industry. And so in Hall C, they would have a hemp manufacturing plant where they would take raw materials and redistribute them as building materials. And then lastly, we have these 2 honoring cultural legacy proposals. One is the Site of Conscience. That was submitted by Japanese American Museum Oregon and Vanport Mosaic. They really saw a home for some storytelling on the site, specifically around Hall A, where they wanted to tell the story of forced displacement on the site from World War II and the Vanport floods. And then secondarily, the Oregon Black Pioneers, they wanted to build a museum on the site, a traditional museum with all its offerings to really tell the rich history of Black Americans in this region through time immemorial. So, next slide. So we went through, we received all these proposals. We went through an evaluation process. You'll see you'll see it left to right here, but in reality, it was all happening at the same time. So we went through a Metro internal completeness check, make sure that the proposals were all ready to go and met the submission requirements. We had a facilities function review and a financial review. Just given these proposals that came in had very limited financial information. So really they were determining, the financial committee was determining whether or not they had a feasible path forward to capitalize the project and also a sustainability plan for long-term management. The facilities function really looked at whether these proposals would be complementary use for the site or were there any questions in regards to whether or not it would actually, any of these proposals would function at all on the site. We had the community partners review. I'll talk a little bit more about this review committee in a second because it was some of the most impactful overarching recommendations. But they were really there to determine whether or not these proposals aligned with the 7 evaluation criteria that aligned with our guiding principles. And lastly, we offered our proposals to our tribal government partners and our other government partners, jurisdictional government partners, to kind of review and assess whether or not there was any feedback in terms of permitting, financial programs that may be out there. So we got a lot of feedback, and our tribal government partners also provided feedback, which Katie will talk about in a second. Lastly, we did an interview with each submission team. Councilor Lewis, Commissioner Chris Rusoff, and staff all met the teams and had these wonderful conversations with each of the submission teams, and these proposals really came alive. And we actually got to see whether or not, how we felt about each proposal team as partners. And I think that those conversations were invaluable in terms of how we ended up where we ended. And then lastly, we did a SEDS review and, really some additional kind of contexting in terms of the Urban Land Institute. So let's go to the next slide. There were a lot of eyes on Expo this past year. Thanks to Commissioner Hall, we got to participate in an Urban Land Institute grant where Expo was a case study. And a panel of 7 experts spent a whole day contemplating Expo, at Expo, and they really had these big recommendations for Metro. One was just to think big. This is a generational decision, and that this area may be built up for the future, and we should consider that. The project could benefit from this visioning, internal visioning. Where do we see this project going? How does Metro align with the Expo? And then they talked a little bit about alignment with the SEDS And lastly, they really talked about this is a complicated site with unbelievable history and that we should really take the time to do outreach. And then I think we're at, next slide. I will talk a lot. I could talk a lot all day about this community review committee because they were wonderful. Community review committee, we have two of them right here. And I'd like to say that, you know, these folks were so dedicated to this process and took an incredible amount of time reviewing each proposal very carefully. They wanted to meet extra because they took this role so seriously. And I think, you know, I am so grateful that we had a committee that was not only connected to the site through the site's history, but also we had committee members who were connected to the guiding principles. So the panel was from ages mid-30s to mid-80s, and they had a lot to say about each particular proposal, but I wanted to present some overarching recommendations, which you'll see on screen. But, you know, the site should really remain a community-centric asset was something that resonated with me a lot, that complements the historical and cultural significance of the site. You know, we maximize partnerships with local businesses and establish clear equity goals. But these two could talk a little bit much more clear and about this. So I will hand it over to Paul to introduce our
Thank you,
invited
Gian.
testimony.
And if you'd please go to the next slide. We wanted council and commission to hear directly from members of our community review committee. And so Lynn Fujigami Parks and Councilor Ed Washington are joining us here today to briefly share with you sort of the process we went through, but why Expo is important to them. In addition, Katie McDonald, through our Tribal Affairs program, has reached out to tribes at the site, and Katie is prepared to summarize the input that she's received from the tribes with you as well, so you can hear that. So what you'll hear is from Lynn, and then from Ed, and then Katie in succession, and then we'll pass it to our COO, Marisa, for her recommendation. Okay. Lynn?
Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everyone. My name is Lynn Fujigami Parks. I was the executive director for the Japanese American Museum of Oregon until I retired at the end of 2021. To provide a little bit more context, my family was incarcerated during World War II. I had 7 uncles and my father that served in the U.S. Army and fought for the country that had held and incarcerated their own family and friends. This really shaped who I am and inspired the work that I did and continue to do today. So I first wanted to thank Gian and Paul really for the incredible work that they did in guiding all of us through this process. And I wanted to also thank Ed Washington and my fellow committee members really for their work and their participation. It was really a thoughtful and very thorough process that, as Gian said, we all took very, very seriously. It was informative and enlightening, and I really greatly appreciated the discussions and conversations that we had. I, like Ed, have been involved in this process very early on, probably I think since 2019, when the first outreach was being done with stakeholders. So those meetings and those sessions. And every step of the way, I have to say, you know, you're always asking yourself, am I just checking a box? Or am I really going to have an impact and an effect on the outcome? You might say, you know, we have a seat at the table, but are we going to be able to feast, you know, the fruits of our labor? So I've been involved in fighting the destruction, demolition, and erasure of our history, both locally and nationally, and I have to say it's exhausting. It's often very painful and often in vain, but this process, I feel, allowed our voices to be heard, especially when you see it reflected in the guiding principles that were established. And now fast forward, I feel that really community voices did have an impact as I look at this evolving vision and the recommendations that are being put forth today. So I applaud recommendation number 1 to memorialize and recognize Hall A as a site of national and historic significance to the Indigenous, Black, and Japanese American communities. I would really add to the language that it was really more than forced displacements during World War II. It was forced removal and unjust incarceration. So whatever is there has to be more than just the plaque that is there now. And there is a sense of urgency to this work. So there are very few survivors of the incarceration, and they need to know that the place where they were held, where animals were held and shown, is memorialized, and that their legacy will not be erased and not forgotten. And especially with the rise in racism and hate and violence that we see across the country today, Portland, you all have an opportunity to show that we stand for the values and the principles that our country was founded upon. Equality and liberty and justice for all, not just for some. And instead of erasure of history, we are witnessing in other parts of the country, Portland can really be an example of taking a place of shame and turning it into a place to reflect, heal, and uplift this history to ensure our future. Really a statement against racism, a site of conscience. Now this won't right all the wrongs, but it will help build trust, repair past harm, and really provide some healing for the deep generational trauma that many of our communities experience. I'm also excited to, about recommendation 2, as I've always viewed Expo as a unique asset to the city of Portland, really hoping for a new sustainable vision to expand its offerings and really make it the best version of what it can be, a place that serves the city and its people, a venue that draws national and international events, creates prosperity and provides access. So access to serve the underserved and underrepresented communities. And finally, I want to emphasize that the vision must continue to be co-created with the stakeholder communities. This place in the history that it holds must be authentically told and shaped by the people whose experience is embodied in this sacred site. Stakeholders really must continue to be involved in a way that continues to impact the outcome. And I think, to end, Laura Loforti of Vanport Mosaic, I think said it best. She said that this site should be a place to remember, repair, reclaim, and reimagine a new chapter where we all heal, belong, and thrive. I hope that you'll support this vision moving forward, this new chapter. And I know that the Japanese American community and myself really look forward to helping you all make this vision a reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. President Peterson, I forget not the committee members, but the administrator, sorry. They didn't have that when I was on the Metro Council, so that's why I'm trying to make sure I get it right. My name's Ed Washington. I am a former member of the Metro Council, and I consider myself very, very, very fortunate to have been part of this committee. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I want to also first recognize that the other members of our committee was Terrence Moses, Kenton Neighborhood Association. Of course, you know Lynn Fujiyama Parks, former executive director of JAMO, and Japanese American community members. Ivan Hernandez, director of engagement, Hillsborough Hops. David Van Hoff, Climate Solution Partners, and Paul Lumley from NEA, and myself. It's so very interesting as a member, a former member of the Metro Council. It was myself and another councilor, John Kvistad, with the support of the entire council at that time to build the two new halls that are at Metro. But to jump from that, I have to go back to where I grew up, first 1944 through 1948, was in Vanport City, Oregon. I lived in Vanport, went to school in Vanport, and did not know the history of Expo with regards to the Japanese community. I never knew that until years later. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know that there was internment camps until years later. But having the opportunity to help build the two new buildings and really get the opportunity to know the history of Expo. And so I think that as whatever they're going to do, they're trying to make sure that we need to be reminded of the bad parts of the things that happened there. But we also need to know the good things that Expo did. Living in Vanport, Expo was really a next door neighbor for us as school kids. We went over there for the livestock shows every fall. We spent a lot of time at Expo. It was used for a lot of different things back then. I remember marbles was very, very popular. You guys are not of that generation, but I am. And some of you may recognize the name Jackie Winters, former state senator for the state of Oregon from Salem. Senator Winters and my family were very, very close friends. And we grew up very close together in Vanport, and then after the flood, we sort of followed each other trying to find permanent housing. So her mom and dad was my mom's best friend. And Jackie was, that's what we called her, Jackie was a very good marble player. And she loved to tell everybody whenever I was introduced around her that how many times she beat me in marbles. And she did. She was very, very good. And I was not a good marble player. I didn't care about that. But she was such a wonderful person, but she lived in Vanport. One of the first marble champions for the state of Oregon was a young man named John Penn. John Penn lived in Vanport. As a matter of fact, he won his state championship at Expo. It was held at Expo. I don't know how they got dirt in there to make ground for the marbles, but he did. And so there's so many other things about Metro. A lot of people don't realize that back in the early, I think it was mid-50s, the University of Portland was building a brand new gym out on the bluff, and they didn't have a place to play basketball. So they took the arena where they used to have the rodeos, put a basketball floor in there, and the University of Portland used that basketball arena, for their part of their basketball season. And also I remember seeing Wilt Chamberlain playing against the Harlem Globetrotters. Wilt played for the Harlem Globetrotters, and they came through on a tour in Portland, and they played out at Expo. So Expo has so much history, and not only that, but its connections to North Portland, its connections to really the entire area. So I think that what the plans that they have put together, the recommendations that they're putting together for managing Metro and Expo and keeping it, I think are absolutely outstanding, and I support it. I just don't think that you can go that many places in the Portland area and find 53 acres of land anywhere, not today. And so it deserves to be protected, it deserves to be used, and I think that this committee and this government is doing the right things. I support it. I only have one question for Jen. She mentioned, I think she said the committee members range in age from something to something. I don't know who that 80-year-old person is.
I have no idea.
Just because I celebrated my 86th birthday last Saturday.
I said 80-something.
It's 80-something. But thank you so very much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I tell you, having had the opportunity to serve this community as a member of the Metro Council, and I think Councilor Nolan and I, she had the same district that I served, and that district was created new District 5, and it's the biggest district. It takes in all of Portland, all of downtown. So it's such a pleasure to be here and to come back, and I thank you all for not forgetting about an old counselor, and let me come back and say a few words every now and then. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great.
You can pull it towards you.
Thank you, counselors and MERC commissioners. My name's Katie McDonald. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the tribal liaison in Metro's Government Affairs and Policy Development Office. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to join you this morning in this staff presentation to share comment and input that Metro received regarding the Expo DOS and the Expo DOS RFEI following our efforts to invite, engage, and consult interested sovereign tribal nations. As you know, our invitation for consultation with interested tribes in this project stems from our project team's awareness and recognition of the Lower Columbia River and the surrounding areas as places with rich histories prior to the colonization and settlement of what we now know as Greater Portland. Histories and connections which are sustained today in the present time and will be in the future as tribes and indigenous people continue to live in relation with and care for the Columbia River, the land, the environment, and resources that have been integral and uninterrupted components of tribal cultures, histories, and lifeways since the beginning of time. While we are talking about the future of a facility that was first established in the early 1920s, it's important that we ground ourselves in the importance of this area since the beginning of time to the first peoples of this place. I know the council and commission are familiar with the concept of tribal sovereignty, but for others who are a part of the meeting or discussion today, who this is a new concept or who are less familiar, I just really want to stress the importance of regarding the following priorities and comments as those belonging to distinct sovereign tribal governments who Metro has engaged in a direct government-to-government manner in this project. Tribes are independent sovereigns with inherent powers of self-governance and relationships with the United States that derive from treaties, federal law, and executive orders. These federal tribal relationships are political and don't derive from race or ethnicity. Metro is seeking to support tribal sovereignty through government-to-government coordination with tribes, exploring opportunities to incorporate their interests into our work, and of course, ensuring agency compliance with pertinent cultural, historic, and natural resource protection laws. The following comments from tribes and input shouldn't be conflated with important engagement from members of what we now know as Greater Portland's urban indigenous community, and their voices and input have also been very important in this project. And I also just want to quickly acknowledge the partnerships, relationships, and voices of additional communities who are here with us today, who have really distinct and important connections to the site as well. And thank you for what you've shared with us already this morning. So I'm going to jump into a summary of the comments that we received from tribes who responded to our invitation to consult in this project. I'm going to go alphabetically by tribe, and I apologize for all the notes, but I just want to make sure that I didn't leave anything out and that we're reflecting and sharing input in the way that tribes asked us to receive it. So one of the tribes we engaged with was the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, specifically about the RFEI process and the proposals that were received. The tribe was very impressed by the variety and quality of proposals received by Metro and shared that they did see some seemed a better use of the site than others. The tribe is very much in support of any proposal that would include spaces for reflection and in particular spaces for healing for traditionally marginalized communities. The tribe especially liked the Expo Center Reimagined proposal for its multi-benefit approach to the space. Within that proposal, the tribe very much appreciated the inclusion of youth sports and activity spaces, which would provide a great benefit to kids who have lost much of that recently due to the impacts of COVID and how that's affected kids at school. The tribe also stressed the importance of continuing to distinguish the input and involvement of tribes as sovereigns, including Grand Ronde, whose ceded lands the Expo Center now sits on. And they are supportive of the broader inclusion and representation of Indigenous people in this project. We also heard the following requests and comments earlier in the process. that art is a powerful way to recognize history. It has a power to celebrate place and is something that can be easily incorporated into built structures. There are some tribal members who are part of Grand Ronde who are the direct descendants of the people of this particular place. And at an appropriate time in the future, they should be invited to participate in the process and tell those stories. The tribe would also like to be re-engaged and have a higher level of involvement should any potential for ground disturbing activities at the site arise, or potential for environmental or natural resource impacts to resources such as water quality or salmon. And last, the tribe would also like to be at the table to weigh in if an alternative for the future of Expo is selected to discuss priorities such as economic wealth building, among others. Our primary points of contact with Grand Ronde were staff from the tribe's Cultural Resources Department, their Ceded Lands Program, and also through an external partner who works with the tribe called Willamette Partnership. One of the next tribes who engaged with us and provided comment is the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. And they shared that they have many tribal members who reside in the greater Portland area, and this tribe's service territory is across 11 counties, including the greater Portland area. They expressed an interest and a desire to be involved in the project and shared that economic development is an important priority for them, and asked us to keep their cultural resources program involved and engaged, particularly to speak around the historic and cultural history of the site. They also suggested that we look at other regional efforts that have incorporated art and storytelling into the landscape and built environment. And one such suggestion was actually the Vancouver Land Bridge Project, led by the Confluence organization that our project team could learn more about. And our primary points of contact with Siletz included staff representation from the tribe's finance office and also their cultural resources program. The next tribe whose comments I'll share is the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. We engaged with staff from multiple tribal departments and programs, including natural resources, their cultural resources protection program, their economic and community development program, and also the Tomaslik Cultural Institute. Priorities shared in these meetings included the following: stressing the importance of the connection to the land and environment as a critical part of the historic and cultural legacy of the site, a desire to follow up with Metro on challenges that may exist at the site as it's now a developed part of a historical floodplain landscape. They expressed an interest in the levee, the northern riverside portion of the property, to explore restoration opportunities. They also expressed a broader interest in learning about other properties Metro owns adjacent to the Columbia River to support restoration efforts. They stressed the importance of restoration at the site for the future that we are in now, but also any alternative future that the council and commission may elect to explore. At the time we started some of our early conversations, the project was actually missing an environmentally focused guiding principle, and so this input helped lead to the creation of that guiding principle within the project. The tribe also said regardless of whatever the future uses of Expo, the ancient time, pre-contact, historical, and modern day connections to the site should be acknowledged. And they also asked to be kept apprised of the process and progress in the decision-making, including being briefed on the outcome of this conversation. The last tribes whose comments I will share from the Cowlitz Indian Tribe, their request to our agency included our efforts to ensure notification and involvement of the tribe before any future Expo development-related ground disturbance, discussing the potential futures of the small portion of the Expo site that is adjacent to the Columbia River, ensuring notification and involvement of the tribe in the event that Metro and MERC do move forward with a cultural or historic resources center, display, exhibit, or some type of programming, and emphasized their interest in the importance of an opportunity should the future include small business opportunities at the site, that we think about how green or sustainable businesses could be invited and be a part of that effort. Our primary points of contact with Cowlitz were with the director of their Public Works Department, and we envision as this progresses that more staff from their natural resources and cultural resources programs would engage with us. And just a few additional broad themes from the conversations with all the tribes, if I can. and you've heard this a bit in the comments I've already shared, but all of the tribes were involved in the project shared their expectation that Metro will ensure appropriate notification and involvement of any potential ground disturbing activities at the site so that we can all collaborate and partner around the protection of important archaeological, historic, or cultural resources which may be present at the site. And all of the tribes stressed that they have maintained strong and uninterrupted ties to the lower Columbia River, the land and the environment since the beginning of time, and that the river has provided abundant natural resources and first foods like salmon, lamprey, and plants. It was also an important place for them to meet, trade, and supported the continued perpetuation of their traditional and cultural lifeways, and that all of those qualities and connections of the Columbia River have made it a really vital part of their lived experiences and identities. They also shared that stories can be told many ways, and that art or on-site interpretation are possible avenues for Metro and MERC to accomplish these goals. And regarding the approach by which this work continues, the tribes have asked for continued outreach in a government-to-government manner. They have asked for MERC and Council's consideration for a flexible and adaptable approach so that we can provide the appropriate space and opportunities for them to be involved. And have expressed their broad support and recognition of all of the other important histories and stories that are connected and tied to this site. So I'll wrap my comments there, and I think, Jan, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, everyone, for providing that testimony. I'd like to pass it to.
Actually,
go ahead.
Prerogative of the president. I want to make sure that we acknowledge that Chair Stoudemire Phillips is here. Thank you. And I also want to, oh, wait, Katie. I think both of you should come back up. Don't go away. I just want to thank you all for sharing today and for your participation. I know you're going to get a lot of thanks later, but before we go over to the COO, I just wanted to acknowledge the wit and wisdom that has been brought to this project by having you part of it, and the stateswomen and statesmen that we've got in our community that have provided such time and energy, so thank you. I learned a lot from watching Counselor in the past on what statesmen's behavior is like in this very chamber. So there's a lot of eyes and a lot of people brought up on watching you work, so thank you. I will pass it over to our COO.
Thank you so much, President Peterson. Good morning, Chair Stoudemire Phillips, councilors and commissioners. You can see why I'm so proud of this work and this process in the way that the folks who have participated what they have brought to the table, intellect and heart. So before I get started, I just want to echo a few things that have been shared up to this point, that this has been a long journey for Metro. We are grateful to have such a strong vision for the site shaped by our community, our counselors, our commissioners, and varied stakeholders. I want to thank again our invited guests, our steering committee, the Expo team, staff and community members, and Amy Nelson. Got multiple shout outs in here. It's your work that has made it possible to distill a vision for the future that I believe reflects the best of who we are, a vision in which all members of our community can hopefully see themselves reflected and honored. So can we advance the slides? I think we've got a couple more.
Let's go one more.
One more, I think. After reviewing the proposals and feedback from our partner review committees and our steering committee, two things became abundantly clear. First, the historic significance of the Expo Center site to the Black and Japanese American communities, urban Indigenous community, and our tribal government partners needed to be recognized. Second, while the 53-acre site had tremendous potential as a film campus, a site for manufacturing or industrial use, it was clear that keeping Expo as a community-centric destination built on our existing strengths was the highest and best use for the site. By keeping Expo as a destination for our region's residents and beyond, we make a space to remember our past and how we got there, while also redesigning the site to focus on what makes not just Portland great, but Oregon great. We see what the Couve has done to the north, and we believe they would benefit from a little friendly competition to the south at the gateway to Oregon. And just to inspire us all before I go into the details, up on this slide, this is a drawing that Paul found of a rendering of Portland's Olympic proposal at Expo. So this is from 1962, and it envisioned a massive coliseum, not saying we're going to do that, but just to give you a sense of the connections to a big vision of this site that we have an opportunity in this generation to make a reality. I love, Councillor Washington, the story about marble competitions, because as I talked to our council members, one of the things that came up was, how do we make sure that as we move this forward and create this big vision, that we maintain space for community? And I can think of nothing more inspiring than kids duking it out and becoming champions, whether marbles are your thing, or basketball's your thing, or any of the other amazing sports that we have. So next slide, please. So the first of my two primary recommendations are for Metro to take action to recognize Expo as a site of historic significance and meaningfully memorialize the site's history of forced displacement during World War II and the Vanport flood. In addition, we want to recognize the site's pre-colonial history and importance to Indigenous peoples. This land was previously part of a dynamic and complex network of wetlands and river channels supporting Indigenous peoples and their ways of life since time immemorial. This one location is tied to many different histories, some going back thousands of years and others more recent. But it is time for the broader region, state, and country to recognize the significance of this site, both its structures and its land. Moving forward, my hope is that Metro will work directly with all the peoples who have histories tied here to determine the contours of that memorialization and recognition. And we should plan to seek financial support for these efforts, not just from Metro or Expo's operating budget, but regional, state, and national entities who also recognize the historical significance of what has occurred on the site. Next slide, please. My second recommendation pivots Portland Expo Center's future to a new but familiar direction. Recognizing Oregon's status as an international overachiever in the sport and outdoor industry, I am recommending that Metro reimagine and redevelop Expo as a destination venue that prioritizes amateur, professional, and recreational sports. As the 2014 Hunden Report articulated a decade ago, sports were an area of growth and expansion for Expo. What we've learned from the recent State of Sports report by the Portland Business Alliance and through our conversations with Sport Oregon is that this has not changed a decade later. Oregon is a sport and outdoor powerhouse. One industry leader told us in the State of Report, this hung with me, and I think it probably did with you too, Oregon designs what the world wears. So this isn't just something that we love, it's something that we excel at. And I've always believed that building on our strengths is the key to a vibrant future. As anyone who has had a child or loved one involved in amateur sports, club sports, or the gazillion variations of outdoor recreation that we live for in our state, from climbing to skateboarding, marbles, competitions and tournaments are also big business. Folks travel far and wide to participate, and with that, bring stays in local hotels, dining in local restaurants, and other tourism-related activities. These latent strengths are also apparent in the way sports competitions are already organically drawn to Expo. Expo staff have booked sporting events like the American Cornhole League Pro National, which will air on ESPN, and the North American Gay Volleyball Championships. This is with our current facilities. So imagine what we could do if we applied Metro's vaunted reputation for placemaking to this site. And P.S., I will take my kids' endless basketball tournament with a delicious burger and Portland craft cocktail, and if you can throw in a play space for my little ones, I'm there. I'm sold. As we imagine this, we should also envision the expo of the future post a new Interstate 5 bridge. In a decade, Marine Drive will be the first southbound exit on I-5 in Oregon, creating a new gateway to our beloved state at Expo. Expo should be a place that welcomes you to all that is wonderful about not just Portland, but Oregon. It should reflect our values, honor our history, showcase who we are and what we bring as a community to the world. We believe that doubling down on this vision and leveraging all the other strengths that we have as an organization are the key to a vibrant future at Expo. But expansion into a new market or markets can't happen without investment. Next slide, please. It's clear that sports-related events bring tremendous economic impact to our region, but we need to get specific about where Expo may be able to capture demand for sports-oriented space. Our next set of recommendations supports our deep dive into the sports event market while also keeping the Expo Future Project and Expo operations moving forward. Our other 4 recommendations ensure that Metro conducts due diligence, so we invest in the right sports sectors so Expo can have the most economic impact while bringing financial sustainability to its operations. We want to make sure that we possess the right project governance to make sure that council and the commission are in alignment and, quite frankly, to keep our feet to the fire. We want to continue to strengthen Expo's operations while we lead up to this pivot in operations, so we can continue to support a vibrant economy. And we also need to ensure that we're coordinating with our jurisdictional partners along the way. Expo is right in between PIR that is starting to bring more and more national, different kinds of racing. It's on the other side of the freeway from Delta Park. If you remember that drawing from the from the Olympic submission in the 60s, they sort of envisioned a whole connected campus. And I think that that's what we need to strive for. And then think about how do we connect that vibrant area by I-5 and the MAX to this area here, where we have our professional basketball, we have our convention center and hotels. I think we can create a really lively connection between the two and have them feed off of each other. I'll wrap up just to give you a sense of the scope of the opportunity nationally. The sport, events, and tourism industry is one of the largest sectors in the travel and tourism industry. According to the latest State of Industry report, sports tourism sector's direct spending impact is $39.7 billion in the United States, the B, with a total economic impact of $91.8 billion. It supports 635,000 full-time and part-time jobs and generates $12.9 billion in taxes in the United States. And we are not capturing, we're capturing a small fraction of that with our current operations. So there's a lot on the table there, and I think that we have an opportunity, like I said, to create a vision that reflects the best of us, and that is just fun. This is an opportunity to bring some liveliness and excitement and make some memories at Expo. So with that, President Peterson, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. I was excited before, and now, with the excitement in your voice and the energy that you're bringing to it and the entire team, it seems even more exciting. So I kind of feel like I want to give everybody an opportunity to comment, both those attending virtually and in person. Rather than calling folks, why don't I just start with Chair, and we can go around from there. Questions, comments to staff and our invited guests.
Okay. Do I push? Oh, come on. Okay. We don't use these in our meetings. Sorry. Well, I just want to thank the team, and especially want to thank Commissioner Kreis-Rusoff and Commissioner Hall, because I know that they were very intricately involved in this process, and we've had many, many conversations, and they've attended many, many meetings. So as we are volunteers, commissioners, and they have day jobs as well, but they took a very special interest in this project and really took it to heart. And I appreciate that. The rest of the commission, we appreciate you representing us in the way that you did in this process. So just wanted to publicly thank the both of you for that. With the committee, so yes, counselor.
We're just gonna call you counselor.
Yeah, I'll still call him counselor because I first learned about what Metro. I remember when Metro started, and I remember when Mr. Washington was on Metro Council. I was in high school when Metro even started to exist, but he's known me all my life. So just want to thank you and the rest of the committee for all the work that you did. And in putting that committee together, I know that it was a lot of work. You know, it was very, very deliberate who was put on that committee to do that work. And we took that, you know, into high consideration of who was going to be represented to make sure that all voices were heard. And I do believe that all voices were heard. Paul and Guillen, we invited you all to start coming to our meetings about a year ago. It was over a year ago. Over a year ago. So you came to our meetings every month and presented and gave us updates and kept us in the loop, and we really needed that because this is a huge project. As it said, the London report was, what, 2014? So we've been at this a long time, right? You know I'm looking at over there. But we've been doing this a long time, and I just want to say I'm glad that we're at the point that we are at. I was excited when I heard what the recommendation was going to be. My last name tells you I'm a sports person, so this is very exciting. This is very exciting that we are here at this point, and we have something that is going to impact the entire region, beyond the region, other states, and the entire country. Of having gone to and played in and now coaching in many basketball tournaments. It's a huge business, and when we think about wanting to bring something here that brings economic prosperity into the future, that is imperative, and this will absolutely do that. So I know we're limited on time, and there's a lot of people to speak, but I just wanted to share that I am very excited about the recommendation that has been put forward, and I'm ready. Let's go. Let's go.
Awesome. Go ahead, Counselor.
Wonderful, thank you so much. It feels so strange to feel like we're at a culmination because we really do have a large body of work behind us, but also this is just the leaping off point to the actual doing. But in the body of work behind us, I have to echo the thanks to staff first for your leadership, for keeping this project alive when it wanted to collapse under its own weight, like probably every 3 months. And then also to community, not only our committee, but also to folks who showed up. I believe we had 4 charrettes at the very beginning of COVID. We were like moving those online before we knew how to do community engagement using Zoom. I attended 1 in person. I think there might have been 1 other in person, but we did so much at the front end that really helped set our guiding principles. And without those guiding principles, because we intended to be community-led and not led by a decision early on from the council or from the commission, we wouldn't have had the results we had without community really helping us with that first slide, that concentric circle that was led by community and refined by community. So I'm proud of the input we were able to still get even in that kind of time of crisis. And that it's evergreen today. The work that we're doing through your recommendation is going to be really critical for families in the region to have it. Oh my gosh, this is not timed well. Okay. Vomit on you, so be careful. But this is going to be a place where families can go, and that's something that Expo historically has tried to serve, but we're going to have a more pointed focus through sport and amateur and youth sport in particular. We have heard today the history of the site, specifically between Japanese internment the taking of native land and the planning failures that led to segregation in Vanport. Those are all points in our history that are tied to greater systemic challenges we're still trying to overcome. And the work that we're going to do is not only about investing and enabling folks to have a place, but a place of community placekeeping and the opportunity to do that work in collaboration with community. I think that the proposal we received is one that's not just about putting something together, but continuing in the future to figure out how to grow and shape that space as community needs evolve. We are also able to look at this COO recommendation and still see our responsiveness to our labor and construction needs so that we're investing in our communities. And I'm also thankful that the proposal that we saw around creative reuse isn't getting lost. That work was really remarkable. The leaders that came together to hold that put together something that I'm glad we are taking that thread and moving it forward at Metro, even if not through this process. So I'm just delighted to see everything that's come forward, and full support, full steam ahead.
Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, excellent. I don't know how you knew I wanted to speak, but I definitely want to share some thoughts.
Well,
here.
we're going around the room.
Oh, great. All right. I was seated at the perfect seat right next to Marisa. Just to share some thoughts, and I want to build on what's already been shared. I'm a huge fan of the proposal, and I want to acknowledge that I'm on the board of Sport Oregon. Just like many of the people around this table have deep connection to sport and to play, both either competitive or just, at the corner park. And I like Marisa mentioned, really see this as a tremendous opportunity for us to tell not only the state or the Pacific Northwest, the country, but the world about who we are. And I think this is a question that our region has really been grappling with for the last decade and a half. We've really been growing up. We've been growing up and feeling the growing pains of maybe, a little medium-sized city to a big city, or, wherever you fit on that spectrum of where you think our region is going. And for us to be able to come together across counties, across cities, and across industries for a vision like this that also builds on memorialization, reconciliation, healing, a place for community building, is to me, it feels like an incredible synergy and an opportunity that we can't miss. And so I'm incredibly grateful for all of the community members, committee members, the Metro team, you name it, for the hard work. And when I think about what this generation can do, as someone said earlier, the opportunity again to be able to tell the world, Oregon doesn't only design what you wear when you're competing at the highest level, or the jackets that you take to the mountain because it's cold and you're hiking or camping, or you're hiking across some glacier somewhere in the world, but also that you can play here, you can enjoy here, and you can compete here, and you can be your best self here. And I think that's what is at the heart of all of our venues, and that's what's at the heart of sport. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thanks, Chair Peterson. First of all, I want to say it's exciting to see the work that the team has done. Normally, you hear people talk about projects, but this team has been really thinking big about the vision. And that's exciting because we've never had anything here in this region that really says we have a destination, come visit, come see what we do, the culture, the people. That excites me. As far as the outcome, I think I always look at the, long-term, just how sustainable it is, return on the investment in the community. And to add Katie and Lynn, I want to say thank you, because most people refer to heritage and art, but you called out the history piece, and the three are entwined, but at the same time, the history is so critical in my eyes in terms of, not just looking at the past or where we're at, but it really, it will be a part of the roadmap forward with this project. That's what I envision. We touched on the economic impact of what tourism brings, and I can assure you that from the research I've done, there's no question about it, this could be potentially a home run, not just for this area, but for the state as a whole. We have not really put much thought in terms of what sports tourism looks like in the state of Oregon. And this project here is an investment for the entire state as a whole. So I want to just say thank you.
Great, thank you. Counselor?
Great, thank you, Madam President, and thank you to the staff and all my colleagues and the community that participated in this process. I think it turned out beautifully. I want to talk a little bit about business and economic development. So we saw in the maps that there's a sports cluster, up around the Expo Center. We have Delta Park, and Delta Park has 7 softball fields, 9 soccer fields, and 6 sand volleyball courts. And in my younger days, I played a lot of ultimate frisbee there as well. We also have the Portland International Raceway. So more than 30,000 people attended the NASCAR Xfinity Series race in the rain last June. And another 824,000 people watched on television from across the country. That brought an economic impact of $15 million to Portland. A few months later, the IndyCar series drew thousands more to the PIR and almost 1 million TV viewers. And this June, NASCAR returns, and we're excited to have the only American race in the Formula E electric car racing championship. So something to look forward to this June. So what does that mean for Expo? What I really see here is the potential for Expo to bring even more events to this cluster. Just last weekend, several collegiate athletic conferences had their indoor track and field championships at locations across the country, including in Spokane, Moscow, Idaho, and Albuquerque. So the venue in Spokane hosted the Mountain West and WAC indoor track championship, and later this year we'll host a state basketball tournament, a national volleyball tournament, a national women's wrestling championship, and the USA Badminton Junior Nationals. So all of these bring visitors and support the local economy the same way that the Oregon Convention Center does. This sports cluster supports restaurants, hotels, and potentially thousands of jobs and nonprofits from all over the region. And they bring TV viewers to see the great things that the region has to offer. So expanding on this sports cluster can only help solidify the space, support our hospitality industry, and grow Portland's economy. So I'm really excited for the phase ahead and all the benefits that's going to bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wang. And Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chair Simon Phillips. I think I'll start at the end and just say how much excitement and support I have for the recommendation before we rewind and talk about the process. Because, while the recommendation, thank you, Marisa, for all the great work and insight into encapsulating what is a whole lot of information. A lot of great work went into the process that was put together by the Metro team. And when I say team, it's a whole bunch of different folks. And so just a quick word of thanks, starting with the folks at the venue. It's been a number of years, and it's, while this process has been inclusive and comprehensive and has really demonstrated some of the best qualities that Metro has, it's, created a lot of uncertainty for what is the future of Expo. And to the team at Expo, thank you for managing that in really the best way possible. I think, again, we landed in a place that really balances a lot of the values that this organization holds. and that's demonstrated by a lot of the words of the folks that have spoken here today. Ms. Parks, Ms. Washington, or pardon me, Ms. Parks, Mr. Washington, Ms. McDonald, and really the committee that you were on, and all the insightful and clear-eyed look at the history of the site, and kind of unearthing what Expo Center as a location, as an event venue, what it means to all kinds of different community members and community groups. That's been an impressive body of work in and of itself, irrespective of kind of what is it we're going to do going forward. So, and really reflected in recommendation number 1 to hold that up and to value that, and then moving on to the Metro team that put together the process itself. I think we're into phase 2 now of that process. But Paul and Jeanne, behind the scenes of what wasn't captured is that there was a whole lot of change management even within the Metro team, and managing a process for which there isn't really a clear playbook. So how do you do regional scale equitable development in a place that has a whole bunch of stakeholders and existing business, and then sprinkle in staff turnover and a pandemic and all the challenges associated with that. And, it becomes even more impressive, the body of work that has gotten us to this place. So thank you to you all. There's a way that large-scale development has historically been done by local governments, and I think this is really setting a new example for how we can actually raise up the comments and the insights and the input from community, and make that a central tenet of what is important to Metro, and that builds on a lot of the work around equity that Metro has been doing, I think, and demonstrates the credibility that Metro has around valuing the fundamentals and objectives of the work of the core committee here, and the rest of staff on equity. So all that, and I think we've got a really exciting vision for what this place can be as, Expo and even so much more, by really kind of focusing on what are the existing and kind of current opportunities around sports tourism. I look forward to the work ahead, really getting into the details of what that looks like, and because it's clear to me from having gone through this process that there's so much opportunity there. And again, I think we landed this in the right place, and thank you for everybody who's been involved.
Thank you. Counselor.
Madam President, Madam Chair, colleagues, and special comments to my predecessor. Ed, I consider you a bit of my North Star, since your service on this council occurred during formative years in my own public service career. And I hope I have learned enough from you to carry on the tradition. Enough has been said, I think, about the energy, wisdom, collaboration that has gone into developing this proposal. And I would like to move forward, not being too presumptive, but assuming that we do move forward, to put some markers out for ourselves about how we move forward. I was deeply moved, as I have been both on site and in other tours of Expo and the land on which it sits, about its history. It is unique and compelling history involving human beings, starting from long before, from the First Nations, let's put it that way, and the community building, the sense of shaping family and community futures that is embedded in that land. and how during internment and incarceration, white people made that objective deeply difficult for our Japanese American neighbors and citizens. And the joy that Vanport had, the promise it had for communities that were blended and could thrive, and then the devastation that the flood created to that demands, those histories demand that this not just be another sports arena or baseball stadium, but a place that centers a commitment to community building and family development and joy. I love the work that's been done. I endorse moving forward. I want to put out there that it is incumbent on us, elected members, appointed members, staff, to really implement this plan in a way that deeply honors and centers those compelling histories and opportunities, history and future. I love the comment about becoming good ancestors for future generations. And as we think about that across racial equity, I want to also call out economic equity, so that this is a place that every family can afford to participate in, that it is not just $300 tickets for select events, and that it is not just, we can celebrate excellence and hard work, personal achievement in sports, but we should also celebrate good enough, because not everyone can come home with a gold medal, and we should celebrate the striving. We should celebrate the joy that people experience in participating, not sitting in the stands, but out on the field. I know that the hearts around this table are good and value those values that I just articulated, and I look forward to working with all of you to realize that dream in a way that truly sets this sports-centered community asset apart from all the more mundane sports arenas in the country.
I liked that last sentence. I'm sorry, I'm just reflecting on it. It took me a minute. Thank you, Counselor. Commissioner.
Thank you very much. I first want to thank Chair Stoudemire Phillips for appointing me to sit on the DOS. It has been a ton of work, a ton of meetings, but really so good. It was a great group of people to work with. We couldn't have had a better team that led this great project. Why was this a great project? Well, first of all, we engaged the community, and it started off in a way that, I mean, it was a little like herding cats, right? All these people in a room talking about it, but the people in the room came up with, this is what we need to look at, and this is the way we need to do it, and it should be a circle, and we have these spokes. And it was an amazing process, and I felt from the very beginning so touched by that process. I also just want to say that let's see, we brought all of these ideas forward, so it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It reached out and said, we're not all that great at thinking about the ideas because we're really here. So how do we get all these ideas involved? And it brought those ideas forward. And we came up with a direction to explore. Thank you, Marisa. So we did what we needed to do. I also want to thank this committee and for listening to all the interviews to realize Expo isn't a problem to solve. Expo is a crown jewel. It's an asset. And the Urban Land Institute said this, think big. And I'm so excited. We are thinking big. This is exactly what the process was intended to do. Regarding Hall A, when we listened to the proposals from from Vanport Mosaic and the Japanese American Museum, and read the different, the Black Oregon Museum proposals, it was just so clear to me that we need to do something different, right? We need to do something special. And I'm really excited about that part of it. One thing I want to make sure is that we don't just tuck it away in whatever we make with Hall A, whatever we do, which I know is going to be really community-centered and special. But we have an opportunity here with all of these different youth sports, amateur sports people coming from around the nation. And we should make sure that that is interwoven into everything that we've done. So we want to draw people into whatever we end up building there. We want this to be an active site. We want this to be something that our youth can learn about what happened here and reflect and have that celebration. So I'm really, really hopeful that we'll be able to intertwine that. And I think we'll get there. You know, I want to think about a little bit into a few details. And I know that this maybe isn't exactly the right time, but I do want to put a few things out there that I've really been thinking about. First of all is it's going to be really important for us to really support the Expo staff. They've been kind of doing work on gum and shoelaces out there, thinking that this may not be going forward. Well, guess what? Expo's open for business, it's going forward, and we're going to be wrapping that into whatever we're doing. It's going to be an ongoing thing. It's going to be changing and becoming something even bigger and better than it already is. And I couldn't be more excited about that. But we have really experienced staff over there, and I want to make sure, you know, as budget season's coming up, that we aren't just putting Metro staff towards it, but backfilling some of the Expo staff so that we can really utilize their expertise. It seems like what happens is we get Metro staff in and they help, but then we have to rely on those people, Matthew, Alicia, Chuck, to be able to continue moving things forward. And so we need to make sure that we staff appropriately. I know we will, but it's just something I wanted to put out there. Also just wanted to note that how excited I am about this potential national site, right? We're going to have national exposure to what's happened in the past. We're going to have national focus on this good sports, amateur sports. I took a few minutes, and it didn't take me long. I mean, I took half an hour just to take a look at how big is this amateur sports business, and it's huge. Now, yes, we are at a jumping off point. We are just starting what is going to be a continued development in how we do this. But there are these sports centers all over the place, and every single one, when I read what was going on in the economy, they're seeing an economic driving from things that just opened since 2018, hello, COVID, of at least 12 to 15% hotel room rates going up, or an expansion, and that is just one way to look at what's happening with the rest of the community. If you have 12 to 15% more people staying in hotels, you've got that many more people spending money out in the economy. So as an economic driver, I think that this is going to be fabulous. Just couldn't be more excited. Just to end it, Expo is open for business. The new Expo will be open for business, and I couldn't be more excited about it.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson.
Last. Yeah,
Oh, no, not last. There are still,
yeah.
there's still a whole virtual room.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Chair Stoudemire Phillips. First of all, I want to thank our staff and the work that they've done in upholding the values and principles that we have here in Metro in terms of engagement. And I also want to thank our invited testimony. I don't know if you know this or not, we closed the gap on 22 years of history with Councilor Washington and myself being here today. So thank you. I will say this is a great opportunity not only to host events and sports for our community and nationally, but I think about the work that needs to be done to build it out. We have a lot of folks in the community that don't have opportunities, and this is not only an economic driver in the future, but for right now, once we get down to the nuts and bolts of things, and literally. And I think that, as we move forward and we think about this space and how it can intertwine with other pieces around it, as Councilor Wong mentioned, and I won't repeat a lot that was said here today, we do have an opportunity to be a crown jewel on the West Coast that people look to. I think that we're right-sized in the middle in terms of, you know, our sister city up top and the other cities down below for some of those events to come in and be showcased in a space that a lot of people don't really come to Portland. So like, how do we continue to build forward in terms of tourism and things like that? So being very new, I think I'm 60 days today. I am so supportive of the proposal and recommendations put forward, and I look forward to being engaged in phase 2. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Simpson. This is the first time getting to meet you, so thank you. And we do have commissioners on in the Zoom room. So I see Commissioner Milan has her hand up. She was ready, so we will start with you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And also special thanks to Commissioner Hall and Chris Rusoff for all the time and work they put in. I just wanted to make sure that I mean, this is a beautiful vision and really great opportunity, but that we also don't forget about the cultural and arts activities, being able to be integrated into that process, like Cirque du Soleil, for example, exploring, you know, circus camp and gymnastics and those tie-ins so that sports and culture can live side by side in an integrated way. And while it can obviously flourish as a sports activity center, that it still maintains those creative cultural events as well that really bring also additional resources to the economy for Portland. And that's all I wanted to share.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Milan. And Commissioner Palm.
Thank you very much. I echo all of the thanks to the team, anyone that touched this project and anyone that supported anyone that touched this project. It was enormous. And I'm just really so happy with the outcome. I would say that as a native Oregonian, I am familiar with the history of the Expo Center and the history and the power at which it was shared by Lynn, Ed, and Katie, truly moving. And if we could take that recording and share that with across the region, across the state, super powerful. I think there's a lot of folks that are new to Oregon that don't know that history, that go to Expo for the garden show and don't understand the significance of this place and this space. So thank you for that. The opportunity to be able to preserve that and to tell that story, tell the stories. I think such a position of honor that we have to be able to do this. I'm truly honored to be on the Merck Commission at this particular moment where we have an opportunity to do really great things and really historic things for our communities. And I just want to thank everyone for that. I'm very excited. Our organization was involved with the State of Sport study and that process. So absolutely understand that this is a way for the Expo Center to really amplify that work and be a part of that work in a very, very economically prosperous way, as well as really helping from a economic place and space and also the jobs that are involved. Thinking about how you bring youth to a place like an Expo Center, sports center, and have them think about careers and opportunities. I just think that there's so much ahead of us. The one thing I would ask is, as I look back at the Hunden study, I'm old, and so I've been involved with a lot of studies that then get put up on a shelf. I think we really need to hold ourselves accountable to get this across the finish line. And I'm really looking forward to working with all of you to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Palm. And Commissioner Martinez.
Yeah, again, I just want to echo everyone's sentiments and just appreciation to the staff and their work and their intentionality of partnering and centering community in this process. You know, just I am also a native Oregonian from Eastern Oregon, Ontario, Oregon, and they are also have a strong hold in preserving the history of the Japanese American internment And so this is just a great bookend to have on the eastern part of the state, this commitment, and then now with Expo to have this other visible historical commitment being made. So I just wanted to add that comment, and then just, again, just appreciate all the time, energy, and intentionality that this process included.
Awesome, thank you. I'll just wrap up. I am hearing pretty much a unanimous movement forward on the COO recommendation. I'm hearing unanimous thank you for the time and energy that staff have put into this. The commitment to, again, I really like what Commissioner Palm, I gave you a new title there. Yet another one. Said, and now I've lost my train of thought, giving you the wrong title. But I think the unanimous support of moving forward, to me, is that we are really wrapping our arms around, as Marisa said, our strengths and assets that Portland Business Alliance has already pointed out, and that we have a cluster, and we need to move it forward. We already know that we have a strength and asset of being a tourism destination, and we want to keep that as we move forward, and make sure that we are growing that we're so good at. And it really speaks to the direction that the council is taking in terms of a 5-year strategic plan with targets for housing, jobs, and the environment. And all with a racial equity lens applied to it. So I think this is it's a beautiful historic moment, because this is not a plan, that's what I was gonna say, Commissioner Palm. It's not a plan to put on the shelf, right? This is the beginning of an actual movement forward for a rebirth of that site with a historic, not just a nod, because I agree, this can't just be a small little showcase like we have today at the Expo Center. This has to be something bigger. Something much more reflective. I like the site of consciousness idea. So I'm hearing a lot of unanimity around all of these themes, and I appreciate, again, all the time and energy to get to the place where we can have this kind of unanimity, because there is a lot of possibilities that we could have gone a lot of different ways, but we chose to stick with our strengths, and I really appreciate that. So. I guess what I would just want to put on the table is some of the markers. Again, we need this to be restorative justice in so many different ways that, again, I'm going to keep calling you Counselor, Ed Washington, Honorable Ed Washington, and I sit on the I-5 Bridge Project in different ways. And I think a lot of the lessons that are being learned out of major projects such as that around community benefits agreements, and what does that mean for the labor that's being, that will be on site for any redevelopment that happens, what kind of work that we've already done in the past at Metro to make sure that through our procurement process, everybody has a level playing field in order to be able to bid as a prime, not just as a sub. That kind of work going forward is going to be really important to getting down into those the details of how this moves forward into the future, while accommodating really making sure that we're telling the stories that you guys have already put forward on the table, but in a bigger way. And lastly, one of my hopes and dreams is that this conversation, this investment can also help with our other venues within the system that need time, as much time and energy put into them that we may not own as Metro, right? But we are working to make sure that the entire system over time is an ecosystem that is helping itself grow and achieve in a bigger way, because there's so many other needs. within the other venues. So again, that would be my hope and dream, is that we can come out of this with some way that this work actually helps that work move forward. So, which is a good stepping off point, Chair. I don't want to, it seems like a downer to go into the next thing, just because this was a historic moment as far as I'm concerned, but it's not a downer because it's about the rest of the venues. But it seems it's quieter. Shall we move on? Does everybody feel like this is just a good moment of a round of applause, maybe, for the staff and our volunteers? You. Chair, would you like to take us from here into the next topic? Oh, okay. We've got venue visioning coming up next. Thank you again, staff.
Well, Lynn wants to share one last.
Oh, okay,
I
that's
just wanted
fine.
to share one last thing. If there was any doubt that this vision is headed in the right direction or not, this is a historic document. It is a drawing of the Portland Assembly Center. It's a map. And in the middle of it, you'll see a sports arena. And I wanted to just mention, you talked about sports and what it represents and, what it can bring to the city. But I wanted to also mention, you touched on it when you said participation and what that represents and what it means. And the Japanese, there was a saying, Shigata Ganai, which means it can't be helped. And the other one is Kodomo no Tamani, which means for the sake of the children. So throughout the incarceration, these were just the things that guided everything, how the experience was received and how they got through it. And I have to say that, they, under those harshest of circumstances, it was all about creating a sense of normalcy. This is how they would get through just these unspeakable, circumstances. And sports was huge. There was so much community and that revolved around sports, and that provided that really sense of normalcy. And so, the sports that took place, there's historic photos I could share of like, I think there's volleyball, but the arena itself, there's that map, and then even in the permanent concentration camps, for example, the camp that most of the people from Portland went to, which is Minidoka, there were 12 or 13 baseball diamonds in the camp itself. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity to do this, but interpret this history and the history of that site in the, around the arena, begin every event with a land acknowledgement, being able to weave these things together. It was just really an exciting opportunity. So again, thank you everybody for all your work and support.
Well, thank you so much. Well, all right. We now have staff coming forward. We have Metro's General Manager of Visitor Venue, Steve Falstick, to give us an update on the venue's visioning. I thought it was important to have both of these in the same meeting. And so I'm hoping that everybody can stay and have a second wave conversation. As we all know, the venues are obviously important to the entire region, and our regional venues are a place to build community. To help support our venues and our partners, we have embarked on the process to clearly define Metro's priorities, values, and our role as the operator of the region's largest visitor venues. Through this process, we hope to develop a path towards the long-term sustainability of our venue's ecosystem and take steps towards making the region a world-class destination for residents and visitors. At our last joint meeting back in September, we were just at the beginning of this process, and a lot of progress has been made. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I understand we have the next 2 hours to talk about venue
Okay, good.
vision.
All right. I was unaware of that, so thank you for clarifying.
We got a lot to talk about for venues. Well, good afternoon, Council President Peterson, Chair Stoudemire Phillips, councilors, commissioners. I will just real briefly say on behalf of staff, and I am not speaking for Matthew, but I guarantee he would agree that we are so thankful to be at the spot where we're at today with Expo's Future. And we are ready to roll up sleeves and really get after all of the great opportunities that are in lockstep with Metro values and the future out there. So exciting times. With me today is Nancy Straining of Metro's Capital Asset Group and Susan Hartnett of Hartnett and Associates. Nancy has many years of experience with construction project management, including at P5, and has joined the Venues Visioning as our project manager. Susan is our project consultant, and all of you met her during our preliminary interview process. A lot of information has been shared with you already. We did talk about potentially canceling this, but we wanted to give a quick 5 to 10 minute update, and you'll be hearing from us more in these future joint meetings. If you think back to where the DOS was, we're kind of in those early stages right now of development, but much like the DOS and futures as well, we want to keep you informed along the way. So with that, I'll pass it off to Nancy.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, Council President Peterson. And I'm sorry, this is my first time doing this. And Chair Stoudemire Phillips and councilors and commissioners. I'm really excited about this project, hence the nerves. There's just so much to it. We're very excited. We've gathered a really, really great team. Will Norris, who is our Venues Visioning Finance Manager, is going to be heading up the research and data collection. And then we've got Kimberly Abels, who's going to be our communications lead. Amy Nelson is keeping us all organized and intact. And then we've got Susan Hartnett, whose institutional knowledge of the region and of the venues is going to be so, so helpful. And then our, fearless leader, Steve. The initial round of interviews is complete, and even when that was underway, we're putting the team together, thinking through what the scope and what the work plan might look like. We're continuing to kind of synthesize that input that we got from the interviews to sort of see what this is going to look like and what the work plan is going to look like. And we're looking forward to sharing those details at a future meeting. So I'm going to send this over to the interviewer who has all that information. We're going to synthesize and introduce Susan.
So thank you, Nancy, and good afternoon to Council President Peterson. And I still have to chuckle when I say that. Chair
Susan was my
Stoudemire-
boss.
Eons ago. Chair Stoudemire Phillips, councilors and commissioners, it's really a pleasure to join you all today. It's been a while since I've been in this chamber, but I appreciate being back. So in December and January, I conducted 25 interviews with Metro councilors, MERC commissioners, and I really appreciate that each and every one of you, including outgoing Councilor Craddock and incoming Councilor Simpson, both participated in that conversation. I also spoke with a number of people in Metro leadership positions, with the venue directors, and with several key City of Portland leaders, political and staff as well. Most of the interviews were somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes long, but I do want to note that there were several people who spent more than 90 minutes with me sharing their thoughts and their passion on these very complex topics that underlie this concept of venue visioning. Everyone's input was thoughtful, innovative, creative, informative, and it did display a lot of enthusiasm for this work. And we collectively want to say a sincere thank you to everyone for their time and participation in that process. The major themes that were distilled from the interviews, and I did make it clear to everyone when I chatted with them that I was not going to be sharing specifics like so-and-so said such and such, but that I was really looking for themes and overarching ideas that were coming out of the conversations. And I will say that what I've been able to distill from that has identified a number of areas of consensus about venues visioning, as well as some areas of divergence. And I'm going to touch on a few of those today. And as Steve said, as we come back in the future, probably share more and in more detail. So one thing I will say is almost everyone, I really can't think of anyone I talked to who didn't say that they're really interested in knowing more about the ways that metro venues add value to our communities, more about their current conditions and the long-term viability of the venues, and how the region stacks up in comparisons to other places. There was a surprising amount of interest in how are we doing in comparison to others, wanting a report card, if you will. Significant interest was also expressed in understanding the governance and funding models used by other cities and regions. Particularly, people want to know more about the approaches that other places use to fund the capital investments needed to construct and maintain venues throughout their life cycle, as well as ways to support sustainable operations. So that will definitely be part of what we're looking for is what can we derive from other places and what are they doing and what could we repeat here? The main ideas about the scope of the work that emerged are kind of threefold in nature. Many of the contributors to the interviews think that venue visioning should focus on Metro's role in managing and improving its current portfolio venues. Others feel that venue visioning should be a Metro-led effort to identify and address what is missing in the regional venue ecosystem. And I would say many others feel that venues visioning should do both. I think it's also important to acknowledge that everyone recognizes there are many challenges for these scope options, including how to fund the outcomes, the complexities of engaging regional partners, as well as engaging with diverse communities that all have an interest in these topics. Over the next weeks, Steve and the team will be sorting through these themes further and developing an initial work plan to begin the research phase and refine the engagement phase of the effort. And with that, I will turn it back to Steve.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Nancy. Happy to answer any questions or comments for you at this point. As I mentioned, this truly was meant to be just an update of kind of what we've accomplished and ourselves getting geared up for kind of this next big step. But happy to entertain any comments or questions at this point.
Anyone online or in the room have a question, follow-up statement? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
I would just like to thank you for doing this. I think it's important work. It's something that will help us as a commission go forward with what our job is, how we're supposed to, how are we doing? What can we be doing better? What should we be considering when we're looking forward? Which I think will then in turn, shape how Merck works with Metro on it going forward. So thank you.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Sure, thanks so much. And Susan, I really enjoyed our interview time together. I'm wondering, in putting together your list, did you have an interview time with anybody involved with the state level efforts right now around venue funding? Or if that's something that you might plug into in the future?
We did put that on a future list. Yeah, we felt like we wanted to keep the initial stakeholder list fairly small and close to home, but I agree that we need to expand it as we move forward.
Absolutely, yes. The opportunity not only to partner with them for funding, but also just in terms of making sure our delineation of responsibility echoes how it's working in other parts of the state.
Awesome. Well, thank you for starting this process and moving it forward. Because I think part of what this council and the Merck Commission, I think, if I can speak on everybody's behalf, is right. We want to move stuff forward and actually accomplish some things. And this helps set the grounding of the knowledge. And so I appreciate all that work that you're starting out with. Thank you. All right. With that, much appreciated. We will move on to our Chief Operating Officer Communications. You have clear direction to move forward to the next step.
Hello again, yes. Thank you so much for that wonderful discussion. I'm so excited to move that work forward, and we will come back to you soon with a concrete project plan for the next phase. So just wanted to lay that out as a next possible step. And also, Councilor Gonzalez, I love the use of the word play, and I think that's what was missing from my comments. I think is that and Councilor Nolan, joy. That joy and play, I think, is needs to be a cornerstone, and that is where I think we'll find that community healing. Moving on to more mundane things like the weather, I just want to give a shout out to our staff across the organization who have been grappling with the impacts of the snow the last week. So far, it looks like it's holding out there, not sticking. So let's keep our fingers crossed that it stays that way. I think we're all sick of it at this point. But staff did an amazing job getting things open, keeping things open, being there for our clients, keeping things safe and people safe, and just really appreciate that. And then lastly today, I'm pleased to welcome today the newest member of the council office, Johannes Wolde, who will be serving as our Partnerships and Community Investment Program Manager. This is the social innovation program that you've heard so much about in previous budgets. Johannes comes to Metro with a wealth of experience in the nonprofit and foundation sectors, serving communities around the globe. He has most recently worked with Nike, the Nike Foundation, and Mercy Corps. So please join me in welcoming Johannes to our team and find time to say hello in the coming days as you're wandering around. Thank you.
Awesome, that's exciting. Moving on to counselor or commissioner communication. Anything for the good of the order? Counselor Lewis?
Sure, I believe that in the upcoming weeks, Councilor Nolan and I are going to be switching off with legislative updates prepared by staff. Traditionally, I think we've had Andy Shaw join us, but we're going to try this, like taking a written report for the legislative pulse. So tomorrow, 2001, we'll have a public hearing and work session, and that's part of the 60-day housing package. So that includes the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. It includes $25 million for youth homelessness funding, $20 million for modular housing development, $3 million for pre-development loans for moderate income housing, eviction reforms, $5 million for ag workforce housing grants, and an emergency use appropriation for homelessness state of emergency. And that's that urban-rural balance that we've heard about in the news based on the continuum of care numbers. In addition, we're watching House Bill 5019, and there's an informational hearing in housing tomorrow, and then in Ways and Means later in the week. This bill will include $130 million per the governor's ask in her executive orders, and $27 million in additional funding to address homelessness in 25 rural counties. And then the last update from our legislative team is that Councilor Simpson is testifying on Wednesday, I hope this is right, on 3016, which is a green infrastructure bill. That's it for the legislative news this week. They're a little bit catching up from their snow days. So all of the 60-day package was supposed to move last week, and they're doing it this week now.
I feel like we need a news, like music behind you now. And that's all the legislative news. Yeah. Any other updates, comments from councilors or commissioners?
Commissioners, I will see you all tomorrow at our regularly scheduled meeting.
And with that, I just want to, before closing this out, I want to thank the MERC commissioners and Councilor Lewis for all the work on moving us forward in our joint work together, and for taking the time to do the joint meeting as well as having your own meetings. I know that that's a lot, but we felt it was really important to stay engaged together as we move through these processes and not have separate conversations and not be in alignment. So obviously with the unanimity around the table, I think it's a good start. With that, seeing no further discussion, the Joint Metro Council MERC Commission work session is adjourned, and the Metro next council meeting is scheduled for March 2nd at 10:30 a.m. Thank you all.
Recording stopped.